As early as 11,000 BC, our species began a gradual shift away from the hunter-gatherer way of life, transitioning to the cultivation of plants we foraged and the domestication of the animals we hunted as a more sustainable and reliable means of securing food. The artificial selection of food plants has since then sustained humanity and forged a deep bond between communities and the land. Within this video, I will explore a species' connection to ancient crops, biodiversity, and the cultural and agricultural value of cultivar preservation. I'm also going to examine how isolation, cultural customs, and localized climates created the diverse crop varieties of the past, and discuss the impacts of modern commercial agriculture on crop diversity. While most accounts prioritize the preservation of genetic diversity in crops to protect against disease, lessons learned from the devastating consequences of genetic bottlenecks such as the Gros Michel banana plague of the 1950s and the Irish potato famine of the mid-19th century, I will focus more on the role of biodiversity in protecting cultural heritage and why this is of profound importance. Historically, ancient crops evolved from their wild ancestors through several different independent agricultural revolutions, marking the beginning of the Neolithic era. In these isolated regions, various plant species were domesticated, each adapting to the specific climates, soils, and cultural practices of the area. This process led to a remarkable diversification among land races, influenced by factors such as genetic drift from isolation, selective breeding for desirable traits, natural environmental pressures, and cultural preferences for taste, appearance, or use. Together, these forces shaped the unique characteristics and resilience of early domesticated crops. The Brassica genus serves as an extraordinary example. It's a diverse group with at least two distinct domestication events from closely related species. Brassica oleracea, which includes cabbages, kohlrabi, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and broccoli, originated in the coastal Mediterranean or along the Atlantic coast of southern Europe, where it was first domesticated for its tolerance to rocky saline soils. Meanwhile, Brassica rapa, a species that includes turnips, bok choy, and napa cabbage, was domesticated independently in East Asia and along ancient trade routes. Both these species originated from a single wild ancestor. As humans migrated and cultivated these plants, brassicas spread across Eurasia, with each region adapting them to local conditions and customs. Over time, the brassicas evolved into wildly distinct forms suited to diverse climates, from the hardy cabbages of northern Europe to the tender greens of southern Europe and Asia. In East Asia, bok choy, a member of the Brassica rapa chinensis group, became a staple vegetable due to its adaptability and rapid growth, meeting the needs of densely populated regions where space and resources were limited. Its ability to thrive in varying light conditions, requiring as little as 3 to 5 hours of daily sunlight, far less than most other brassicas, made it particularly suitable for cultivation in crowded cities like those of 4th century China, where optimal growing conditions were scarce. The diversification of brassicas often reflected the natural and artificial conditions under which they were grown, influencing culinary traditions in different regions. For instance, northern European communities contending with harsher, colder climates favored hardy, thick-leaved cabbages that could be stored throughout winter or fermented for preservation. In contrast, Mediterranean communities with their milder climates preferred varieties like kale and other fresh greens, which could be harvested almost year-round. These regional adaptations in brassica cultivation not only shaped the historical diets, but also continue to influence culinary practices today. Growing up in the Italian countryside, I was exposed to local variations of both Italica and Botrytis groups of Brassica oleracea. I would often come across fascinating, unique cultivars of broccoli and cauliflower, often completely specific to a particular town. An example that has recently gained popularity outside of Italy is the cavolo romanesco, also known in English as Romanesco broccoli. Although the name suggests otherwise, it's actually a cauliflower cultivar developed in the hills of the Lazio region during the Italian Renaissance. Its structure, which beautifully depicts the Fibonacci sequence, reflects the Italian Renaissance poetic and artistic emphasis on beauty, art, and architecture that flourished in the 16th century. Varieties like this can paint a picture of the people, their surroundings, and the rhythm of their daily lives. They give us a look into the agricultural heart of a culture, reflecting a time when the majority of people, as farmers, expressed their identity and traditions through the plants they cultivated for their families and communities. Human-environment interactions during the Renaissance transformed agricultural practices into expressions of art and social identity through the development of ornamental gardening, blending practical and aesthetic concerns. This transformation is exemplified by crops like the Romanesco broccoli, but also adaptations of citrus trees, squash, and carrots into ornamental varieties. Cultivars like this tell us a story of human ingenuity in plant breeding and the deep connection between people and their local environment. Through a humanistic lens, they're more than crops, they carry a creative footprint of the communities that nurtured them in the past. Within these plants, farmers embedded a part of themselves, transforming agriculture into an act of self-expression. To me, it is remarkable that human expression can be so seamlessly woven into the cultivation of plants. These varieties are living reminders of the care, knowledge, and cultural identity passed down through generations, feeding not just the body but also the legacy of the people who grew them. Our crops were primarily and initially bred to better sustain communities. Domesticated varieties are often exaggerated versions of their wild ancestors with an emphasis on enhancing the parts that we consume. The ability to store and extend shelf life of these crops, ensuring that they could feed communities for longer periods, was equally critical. However, in recent times, these practical considerations have been isolated as the sole factors defining a crop's value, overshadowing the broader cultural and ecological significance that they once held. Sadly, many unique varieties and even whole species are either extinct or on the verge of extinction. Often we don't even know which ones are on the verge of extinction until it's too late, and they are gone and slowly forgotten. We can find evidence of this by talking to our elders and looking back at old cookbooks, drawings, and descriptions in literary texts. At the turn of the 20th century, the Green Revolution's rise of commercial agriculture led to a significant shift from polyculture to monocultures. Agricultural scholars attribute this transition to several factors, including advancements in machinery, specialized herbicides, and chemical fertilizers, which made it more efficient for farmers to cultivate single crops over large areas. This industrialization of agriculture favored larger farms which could take advantage of economies of scale, ultimately pushing smaller polyculture farms out of business. Farm sizes have grown significantly over time, with the average acreage per farm more than doubling since the 1980s. In the EU, this consolidation has led to 20% of farmers accounting for 80% of agricultural production. In 1900, 41% of the American workforce either owned or worked on a farm. Within the span of only a century, by 2000, the share had steadily dropped to 1.9%. This consolidation of farming operations led to a significant reduction in crop diversity, as smaller farms that traditionally grew a variety of crops in more relative isolation were replaced by large-scale operations focused on producing uniform, high-yield crops. In the early 1900s, this focus on uniformity and yield was seen as a necessary step to feed rapidly growing urban populations. However, as food systems became more industrialized, the emphasis shifted further towards creating a limited variety of visually appealing, uniform produce that could withstand long transportation and meet the aesthetic standards of supermarkets. This trend came at the cost of biodiversity and the resilience of agricultural systems. By the 1950s, supermarkets had become the primary place for sourcing food, and consumer preferences began to shape the agricultural landscape. Supermarkets needed to offer produce that looked fresh, was easy to transport, and had a consistent appearance. In response, agricultural industries started hybridizing crops, selectively breeding varieties that would yield predictable results. Although this approach addressed the demand for convenient, affordable food, it came at a cost. The loss of genetic and morphological diversity, which had once been an invaluable source of resilience and adaptability in farming. The consequences of this shift extend far beyond aesthetics and economics. For every perfect tomato or apple displayed on supermarket shelves, countless heirloom varieties have disappeared. As commercial farming standards prioritize uniformity, this and other cherished varieties decline, and their loss leads to diminishing flavor diversity and the erosion of a rich cultural uniqueness. Across the globe, farmers and gardeners are stepping up to protect heirloom varieties, with the formation of grassroots movements with the goal of preserving the cultural and genetic wealth of our agricultural heritage. These local initiatives, often driven by small-scale producers and passionate community members, have been exploding in number in recent years, and are not only saving seeds but also reviving the traditional practices and knowledge associated with cultivating these crops. Farmers markets, community-supported agriculture programs, and seed exchanges have become important hubs for sharing and sustaining these heirloom varieties. These grassroots efforts are undoubtedly valuable as they work hand in hand with large-scale initiatives like the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Nestled 130 meters or 430 feet deep within a sandstone mountain on Spitzenberg Island in Norway's Arctic Svalbard archipelago, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault houses an astonishing 642 million seeds, with the capacity to store up to 2.5 billion. These seeds represent hundreds of thousands of unique plant varieties from around the world, preserving their genetic material for future generations and ensuring the resilience of global agriculture. However, as essential as these seed banks are, they're not a perfect solution. Conservation must also happen in situ, within the landscapes and communities where these crops developed to maintain their full cultural and ecological significance. Protected Designations of Origin, or PDOs, give us another powerful tool for protecting agricultural diversity. PDOs certify that a product, whether a wine, cheese, or crop, originates from a specific geographical area with unique environmental conditions and traditional production methods. For example, the Ciliegia di Vignola, a prize cherry cultivated in only 28 municipalities in the provinces of Modena and Bologna, owes its extraordinary flavor and quality to the region's particular microclimate and soil. PDO status ensures that these unique conditions are acknowledged and that the farmers are economically incentivized to continue cultivating these varieties, even when they have certain drawbacks, such as the exceptionally short shelf life of the Ciliegia di Vignola. Furthermore, PDOs help prevent genetic contamination and protect crops from being displaced by genetic commercial varieties. These combined efforts, grassroots movements, global seed vaults, and mechanisms like PDOs, seem to represent a modern reawakening of people's appreciation for crop diversity and farming heritage. These crops are living testaments to human creativity, resilience, and the profound connection between people and their environment. Their loss signifies more than just the disappearance of cherished flavors from the past, but also marks an erosion of cultural identity and centuries of agricultural wisdom. By combining these solutions into a global effort, we can not only secure our agricultural future, but also preserve the histories and traditions that make us who we are. The diversity of our plants and the diversity of our culture go hand in hand, reflecting and enhancing each other. The connection between small-scale agriculture and cultural identity was something that I had the opportunity to explore firsthand during an undergraduate term project. The project initially centered on exploring the role of community gardens in tackling food insecurity in Pima County. However, as my team and I conducted more interviews with various members of community gardens, we noticed another significant aspect of these spaces. They brought people together and created really vibrant cultural centers. Within these gardens, many participants frequently expressed pride in collectively cultivating unique varieties, finding local landraces and knowledge sharing, turning gardens into living expressions of a collective identity. The preservation of crop varieties is worth protecting as we navigate a world increasingly reliant on monoculture and commercial agriculture. By embracing and supporting seed banks, community gardens, grassroots movements, and government-protected regions, like those with PDOs, we honor the historical connection between people and plants, a relationship that has always been as much about cultivating cultural identity as it has been about cultivating crops. From the ancient land races shaped by millennia of human interaction and cultivation to modern community gardens that bring groups together, these spaces remind us of the power of collaboration, innovation, and a shared identity. The lessons learned from history, combined with the resilience of grassroots initiatives, demonstrate that agriculture can bridge the past and the present, anchoring communities in their heritage while empowering them to adapt to future challenges. Protecting crop diversity is not just a necessity for food security, but also a commitment to preserving the cultural and ecological fabric that makes us who we are. In doing so, we can cultivate not just crops, but stronger, more resilient societies that honor their roots while embracing their potential to grow.